I want to go back to something that you said again, Jim, and this is something that's always bothered me in the industry is, and I'll use a comparison. In the airline industry, we have simulators for pilot training, and they're routinely used and required. In the drilling industry, we have simulators for well control. Well known, well established. But what you're doing in that simulator is, again, reactive. How can you control a kick? So coming back to the digital dust of our system and bringing it to the forefront, how important is it as a training simulator for hazards avoidance? Because we can take the historical concept or capability, if you will, of RTAS, and we can then put in front of users a training simulator that in essence does a mock-up, and I believe, Jim, you have mentioned it, maybe even use synthetic wells as training. How important is that level of training needed in the industry, and will that actually help supplement for some of the lack of experience?
Absolutely. I'm drilling a well in the Eagle Ford.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I've got a complete different circumstances in the Eagle Ford than what I do in the Delaware in West Texas. Completely different. I'm not dealing with the long circulation. I've got 1 week zone in the Black Hawk, or I'm sorry, in the Eagle Ford. I've got several depletion zones and saltwater flows and freshwater flows and everything that you can possibly throw at a well is in the Delaware, which is West Texas. And the Delaware being one of the most profitable of the locations in West Texas, they've got drillers. They've been drilling there 5 years and still haven't resolved the problem of what they've done. So what you're talking about is developing a simulator that is location based. In other words, area based is a better word. Then I can put the actual well problems into that simulator, take it out there to a rig, and have them actually work on that. And it does two things. Right now, our expectations of well control training will last approximately 6 months. That's basically what we're good for. And it starts to taper off and taper off and taper off. When people come out of well control school, they're Johnny on the spot. You know, they can almost drive you to distraction, some of the things that they're bringing out of the well control school. In a couple of weeks, that begins to slack off, and in 6 months, it's gone. So what you're talking about is bringing the training back to them in an area that would be absolutely welcome and a positive step towards the culture change.
I would look at it as a different way. If you, and I want to be very cautious about recognizing I don't like manufactured drilling, but if you could take your program, load the historic data, let's say you just took the last 3 wells we drilled, and then synthetically drill them, change the drill pipe, change the pump rate, change motor, whatever you want to say, how much faster could we have drilled that and still avoided problems? Would be an interesting question. Because the best composite well numbers are always based on best that's already been drilled,
Mm-hmm.
of each well section, casing point, etc. This is the ultimate in terms of best composite, right? You know what the hazards, what's been encountered before, change something on the well, drill a synthetic well effectively. How fast can you drill it and still keep the hole and do it?
See,
Wouldn't that be the ultimate?
And this is precisely what happens in, for example, airline simulators.
Bingo.
And so my point is really simple. I mean, we have well control simulators all over the world, but we don't have a single hazards avoidance simulator. I think the aspect of being able to do that kind of training, because, and we probably need to talk some more about that, is because of the market itself, and I'm not blaming the contractors, the operators, how difficult is it to sustain a trained workforce?
Look at the, all right, just look at the travel that you've got bringing a driller. He may live in Mississippi, and you have to bring him all the way to Houston to do the training. He may live in West Texas, and you have to take him all the way to right there. He's working in North Dakota, and you're bringing just the logistics of the training makes it almost impossible. So, what is your efficiency on that? And I've studied this for a long time, and we did this one time with one company as we brought the training to the rig. It doesn't work the first time. You have to develop a system as to where these guys are working 12 hours a day. They're working hard, and your time as a trainer doesn't belong. It belongs to them. They don't belong to you. They don't see it that way. But if you bring something in and you create, like a simulator, you create a problem for them that they can actually solve, you can't get them off of it.
It's a different level of what's commonly called computer-based training.
Mm-hmm.
How difficult do you see that being in the IT world, Jeremiah?
Which aspect? Or
Bringing RTAS to a complete computer-based training simulation level.
Well, there's a lot of levels. You know, something Jim mentioned was essentially modeling, re-drilling with a different hole size, for instance. There's a lot of things we'd have to figure out to get to that point. I think a lot of other things we could do pretty much immediately, honestly. As of right now, we could use the system that we call forensics over historic data, coupled with our playback capability to essentially do this process. And really what we would do is set it so that all the watches and alarms we've already generated are hidden. And we would begin to play that well. And there's a couple of ways you could go about it, and I think that would depend on the type of class. But one would be without any watches or alarms. And you're talking and engaging with the people in the class to say, well, what do you guys think? Let me pause it here. What would you do at this point? What would you think about? What kind of questions would you be asking?
And it doesn't necessarily have to be well controlled. It can be stuck by.
Yeah,
Exactly.
So
a
Joel,
plethora of things, really.
Joel, you have mentioned, and we've previously talked about RTAS and actually the capability of targeting problematic wells, problematic areas, problematic regions, operators with specific problems. In the context of our forensics and what we can do right now and bring this data in out of the digital dust, where do you see that value in terms of say, even the geological aspect?
For me, it's just become a very, I guess the thing about it is I'm sold, okay? I believe this is what we need in the industry. And for me, it's just a matter of getting it out there. And I think you have to just take each operator, you have to look at what their problems are, what they're facing, the contractor. And I think you have to just go to each one of them one at a time and discover what their issues are, show them the value of it, and then put it in front of them. And like I said, you give them the forensic data. We know for a fact, I know there's many times, examples like I gave earlier about we saw connection gas going on. And we pass that information on. They take a kick 3 days later. They take the information, and it's like Jim has said before, it's not like they intentionally ignored us. They're just busy. They have a lot of things going on. But your system makes it possible for them to take that information, and they're being constantly reminded of this, and they have to address the issue at that time. So as far as putting it in the market and helping, I know as far as, I think what it does for service companies is again, we've been trying to push the value and the importance of gas data and quality gas data. And that is a component of what you're getting. And it's not just the gas detector. It's am I efficiently extracting the gas from the fluids to give you the proper, to get enough gas, to get the right reading, to put it into the formulas. So for us, I mean, I think for service companies, this will be a way for them to show their value. Again, the trend has been to get mudloggers off the rig, well site geologists off the rig. And there have been some advantages in that, but typically that's been during the boom. When we had 200 rigs going, you didn't have that many qualified mudloggers or well site geologists to consider the wells. So you took experience and you put them in a centralized location, and you had enough work going where they could justify watching several of them, and there was a working relationship between the geologists and the mudloggers in those centers. But now it's gone the opposite direction. We do have quality people, we have them out there, but now it's cost. You know, our economics are higher, we want to get people off the rig, but again, it always comes to that value proposition of saying that we want to cut our costs, but you're saying, let's drill the well properly, let's get the information we need, and we get the return on investment that way. And that's the culture shift, that's the leadership, that's the value proposition. And that's where you're at. And that's, for me, is the, and I think it's just, you have to tell the story that you guys have been telling here, put it in front of the customer, give them an opportunity to try it out, and I think they'll see it. You know?